The billionaire's voice cracked as he shouted, "Don't touch my car," but fear had already betrayed him. Smoke curled out from under the hood of his multi-million-dollar hypercar, thin and relentless, like a countdown he couldn't stop. His phone showed no signal. His assistants were miles away. His reputation was about to collapse in public. Then a black homeless man stepped forward, not running, not begging, just calm. "I can fix it," the man said. The crowd laughed. Security tensed. The billionaire's hand hovered over the emergency call button, his mind already labeling the stranger a threat. Dirty clothes, no badge, no status, no right to be here. But the homeless man looked at the engine the way a doctor looks at a dying patient, and his next sentence made the billionaire's blood run cold, because it revealed knowledge no outsider should have. In that moment, something far more dangerous than a broken car was exposed. Stay with this story, because what happens next will shatter everything the billionaire believes about power, race, and worth. The first thing Ethan Callaway noticed was the smoke, not the dramatic kind you see in action movies, but a thin, bluish-gray curl rising from beneath the hood of his Quantum Apex. Quiet, precise, expensive-looking. The kind of smoke that told you something had already gone very wrong. "Don't touch my car." The words came out sharper than Ethan intended, cutting through the low murmur of the crowd gathering along the South Harbor Industrial Corridor in San Mateo. He was already dialing his phone, jaw tight, suit jacket still perfectly pressed, despite the heat and the panic crawling up his spine. 17 of these cars existed in the world. This one was worth more than most people's homes, and it was dying. "I can fix it." Ethan didn't look up. He was used to people saying things when they saw money in trouble: tow truck drivers, freelance mechanics, opportunists. He waved a dismissive hand, eyes still locked on his screen. "No one touches the vehicle," he snapped. "I understand," the voice said calmly, "but if you don't let me take a look, the engine will fail in less than an hour." That made Ethan pause. He turned and immediately regretted it. The man standing a few steps away was black, mid-40s maybe, worn jacket, scuffed boots, a reusable grocery bag hanging loosely from one hand. His beard was untrimmed, his clothes clearly slept in. The kind of man most people learn to look past without even realizing they were doing it. Security risk, Ethan's mind supplied automatically. His grip tightened around his phone. "How would you know anything about this car?" Ethan asked, voice cool, practiced. The man didn't flinch. "Because the cooling system is failing. Secondary loop, microfracture." Ethan froze. Those words weren't public. They weren't even supposed to exist outside manufacturer documentation. "That's proprietary information," Ethan said. "Step back." The man lifted his hands slightly, palms open. Not in surrender, more in reassurance. "I'm not here to cause trouble. My name is Caleb Monroe. I helped design the system your engine is based on." A laugh slipped out of Ethan before he could stop it. Short, sharp, disbelieving. "Right," he said, "and I invented the internet." A few people in the growing crowd chuckled nervously. Phones were already out. Someone recognized Ethan. Someone else recognized the car. Caleb didn't react. He simply nodded once and glanced back at the engine, eyes narrowing, not with desire but with concern. "The smoke color tells me coolant is leaking into the tertiary chamber," he said. "If it keeps heating like that, you'll lose the thrust bearings. That repair alone will run close to $1 million. Ethan's stomach dropped, because the car's internal diagnostics had given him almost the same number. He didn't like how that felt. "You shouldn't be this close," Ethan said, stepping back instinctively. "Security's on the way." Caleb nodded again, as if he'd expected that. "They usually are." That sentence landed heavier than it should have. 3 years ago, Caleb Monroe hadn't been standing on cracked pavement near an abandoned steelworks warehouse. He'd been leading a thermodynamics team at Etheron Systems. He'd been invited to speak at conferences where people like Ethan Callaway gave keynote addresses. Then came the accusation. A prototype failure, a rushed deadline, management decisions quietly buried, and suddenly the blame found a convenient place to land. Caleb Monroe, black, brilliant, replaceable. By the time the internal investigation cleared his name, the damage was done. No company wanted to touch him. No recruiter returned calls. And once the savings ran out, the fall became fast and unforgiving. No address meant no job. No job meant no address. A closed loop, perfectly designed. Caleb learned which libraries opened early, which shelters asked fewer questions, which streets tech executives drove through on their way to buildings that would never let him inside again. And now one of those executives stood in front of him, terrified for a machine worth more than Caleb's entire life had ever been. "I'm telling you the truth," Caleb said quietly. "That fracture was flagged years ago. It was ignored." Ethan's phone buzzed, then buzzed again. No service. Of course. The crowd had doubled. Someone from a tech blog was filming openly now. Ethan could already imagine the headlines. Tech titan stranded beside smoking hypercar billionaire, loses it in public meltdown. 2 black SUVs pulled up. North Star Dynamics security. Relief washed over Ethan as the guard stepped out. "Sir," one of them said, already eyeing Caleb with suspicion. "Is this man bothering you?" "Yes," Ethan replied immediately. "He claims he knows something about my vehicle." "I do," Caleb said, meeting the guard's gaze without aggression. "And you should know. You have about 45 minutes before catastrophic engine failure." The guard reached for his radio. "Step away from the vehicle," he ordered. "Wait," Ethan said, almost against his own will. "You said you designed the system?" "I led the original thermal architecture team," Caleb replied. "Patent filed under Etheron Systems. Licensed later for automotive use." Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears. "That can be verified," Caleb added. "Internal memo XT447. Ethan's breath caught. That memo had never leaked. Ever. "How do you know that number?" Ethan demanded. "Because I wrote it." Silence rippled through the crowd. The security guards exchanged looks. One of them hesitated. "Sir," the taller guard said to Ethan, "we should clear the area." The car's diagnostics chimed. Warning, 39 minutes to critical system failure. Ethan looked at the screen, then at Caleb. Then, despite every instinct screaming at him not to, he asked the question that mattered. "What would you need?" Caleb didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't push. "Basic tools," he said. 20 minutes and permission." Ethan swallowed. Every lesson he'd learned about success told him to trust systems, brands, appearances. Every second ticking away told him those systems were failing him now. He looked at the man in front of him, the one the world had decided wasn't worth listening to. And for the first time that day, Ethan Calloway hesitated. Not because of the car, but because something deeper was cracking, something much harder to repair. As you listened to this story, did you feel yourself judging Caleb before you truly knew him? Answer honestly, yes or no. Ethan Calloway stared at the engine readout on his phone as if willing it to change. 37 minutes, then 36. The number glowed like a verdict. Around them, the South Harbor Industrial Corridor had turned into a small arena. People slowed their cars. Workers stepped out of warehouses. Phones were raised openly now, no shame in it. A billionaire in distress was public entertainment. A black homeless man standing too close to his luxury car was a threat. "Sir," the taller security guard said again, this time firmer, "we strongly advise you to step away from the vehicle." Caleb Monroe didn't move, not because he was defiant, but because he knew something they didn't. "If you remove me," Caleb said calmly, "your car will be scrap metal before the manufacturer's team even finds parking." Ethan felt every eye swing toward him. This wasn't just about a machine anymore. It was about control, about who was allowed to be right. "Do you have any identification?" the guard asked Caleb sharply. Caleb reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin, bent card, a shelter ID, Harbor Hope Center. The guard glanced at it and handed it back with visible disappointment, as if hoping for something worse. "No permanent address," the guard reported. "No employer, no credentials." The word hung in the air. No credentials. Ethan nodded slowly, almost relieved. There it was. The justification. The exit ramp. "I'm sorry," he said, already turning away. "My team will handle this." Caleb watched him with a quiet expression. Not anger, not desperation, resignation. "I understand," Caleb said. "I've heard that sentence before." Something about the way he said it made Ethan pause again. "What happened to you?" Ethan asked suddenly, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. The guard stiffened. "Sir?" "False accusations," Caleb replied, eyes still on the engine. "Corporate politics and race." Ethan flinched. "You don't know that," the guard said. Caleb finally looked up. His gaze was steady, tired, unflinching. "I do," he said, "because when my white colleagues made the same mistake, they were retrained. When I did it, on paper, they erased me." The car chimed again. Warning, 31 minutes to critical system failure. Ethan's phone rang, 1 bar of signal, miraculously. Relief surged through him until he saw the caller ID. "Manufacturer support." He answered immediately. "Yes," he said. "I need immediate assistance. I'm stranded." "No, that's not acceptable. The system says..." "What do you mean 2 hours?" His face fell as he listened. "No," Ethan snapped. "This isn't a standard failure. It's the secondary cooling loop." Pause, another pause. His eyes flicked to Caleb. "Yes, I'm aware it's proprietary. That's why I bought the damn car." He hung up. "They won't make it in time," he muttered. The crowd leaned in. Caleb said nothing. He didn't need to. Ethan exhaled sharply and turned back toward him. "You said 20 minutes, Ethan said. "With basic tools?" "Yes." "Even if you're wrong?" "Then you lose the car," Caleb said simply. "Which you're about to do anyway." One of the guards stepped closer to Ethan, lowering his voice. "Sir, with respect, this is risky. We can call the police. We can clear him out." Ethan nodded slowly. He knew what that would look like. A black man, restrained on camera, a billionaire, protected, another clip for the internet to argue over and forget. The car chimed again. Warning, 28 minutes. "What exactly would you do?" Ethan asked. Caleb's posture changed, not dramatically, but noticeably, like a man stepping back into himself. "I'd isolate the secondary loop," he said. "Seal the fracture, vent the contaminated coolant, restore pressure." "That's impossible in the field," Ethan said. "That's what they want you to believe," Caleb replied. "Controlled environments protect patents, not physics." The shorter security guard hesitated. "Sir, I think I recognize him." Ethan turned. "From where?" "Harbor Hope," the guard said. "He teaches there. Engineering classes. The kids love him." Caleb didn't react. He never did when someone vouched for him. He'd learned that validation was fragile. Ethan rubbed his temples. "Show me," he said suddenly. The guards tensed. "Not the repair," Ethan clarified. "Just explain it." Caleb nodded and stepped closer to the hood, carefully, deliberately, stopping short of touching it. He spoke with precision, pointing through vents, describing components hidden from sight. The language was exact, confident, not flashy. Ethan followed every word. This wasn't bluffing. "Where would you even get sealant?" Ethan asked. Caleb allowed himself a faint smile. "Your emergency kit and a convenience store across the street." Ethan blinked. "You're telling me you can fix this with junk store supplies?" "I'm telling you engineering is problem solving," Caleb said. "Not worship." The guard returned moments later with a small bag. "Sir," he said quietly to Ethan, "I called the shelter. They confirmed his background." The car chimed again. Warning, 19 minutes. Another SUV pulled up. Different markings. Corporate security from a neighboring campus. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward, eyes sharp, dismissive. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "we've had reports of unauthorized access." His gaze slid to Caleb and hardened instantly. "This man needs to step away." Caleb slowly straightened. "I warned you," he said calmly. "In 15 minutes, the coolant reaches critical temperature. Then the stabilization unit fails." The executive scoffed. "And you know this how?" Caleb met his eyes. "Because I designed the stabilization thresholds." Ethan felt something snap. "Enough," he said sharply. All eyes turned to him. "I want verification." Caleb nodded once. "Call Dr. Marissa Feldman, Orbital Frontier Labs." Ethan's breath caught. That name carried weight. He dialed. When the call connected, he didn't waste time. "There's a man here who claims to know you," Ethan said. "Caleb Monroe." The change in Dr. Feldman's voice was immediate. "Caleb," she said, "is he safe?" Ethan swallowed. "Yes," he said slowly. "He's here." "Put me on speaker," she demanded. Caleb closed his eyes briefly when he heard her voice. "Marissa," he said softly. "Where have you been?" she asked. "We looked everywhere." "I fell," Caleb replied. "Hard." Ethan listened, stunned, as Dr. Feldman spoke with unmistakable authority. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "Caleb Monroe is the most gifted thermal engineer I've ever worked with. If he says he can fix your car, you should let him." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. The executive security chief stepped back. The guards shifted, not away from Caleb, but subtly closer. The car chimed again. Warning, 12 minutes. Ethan ended the call and looked at Caleb. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Caleb shook his head. "You owe me time." Ethan opened the hood. For the first time, the crowd went completely silent. The hood of the Quantum Apex lifted with a soft hydraulic hiss, exposing a maze of carbon fiber, polished alloys, and glowing diagnostics. It looked less like a car and more like a living organism, one that was failing fast. Caleb Monroe stepped forward. In that moment, something subtle but powerful shifted. The crowd no longer saw a homeless man near a billionaire's car. They saw a professional at work. His posture straightened. His hands moved with calm certainty. The hesitation, the defensive quiet he'd carried for years, faded into focus. "Emergency kit," Caleb said. Ethan handed it over without question. The security guards, who minutes earlier had been ready to remove Caleb by force, now formed a loose perimeter, not to keep him out, but to give him space. The car chimed again. Warning, 9 minutes to critical system failure. Caleb didn't rush. He never did. Rushing caused mistakes, and mistakes were something the world had never forgiven him for. He opened a small access panel, shining a light inside. A faint hiss escaped, almost imperceptible, but enough. "There," Caleb said. "Exactly where the stress curves intersect." Ethan leaned in, watching with awe as Caleb pointed to a hairline fracture barely visible to the naked eye. "That tiny line," Ethan whispered. "That's what's doing all this?" "Yes," Caleb replied. "Pressure doesn't need much space to destroy everything." One of the guards returned, holding a small paper bag. "The pencils," he said. Caleb nodded, selecting one with careful precision. He removed the graphite core, crushed it finely, and mixed it with sealant from the kit. His hands moved with surgical accuracy, as if muscle memory had been waiting years for this moment. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, unable to hide his curiosity. "Creating a temporary compound," Caleb said. "Strong enough to bond with the alloy. Not elegant, but effective." The car chimed again. Warning, 6 minutes. Phones were recording now, but no one spoke. No laughter, no whispers. The tension was too thick. Caleb applied the compound carefully, sealing the fracture, then vented the contaminated coolant into a makeshift container. The iridescent liquid shimmered under the light. "That coolant costs about $20,000, Ethan said faintly. Caleb nodded. "Closer to 30 now, probably." Ethan stared at him. "You know the exact cost." "I helped price it," Caleb replied. The final step came down to seconds. Caleb resealed the panel and stepped back. "Start the engine," he said. Ethan hesitated. "Trust me," Caleb added quietly. Ethan pressed the ignition. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the engine came to life. Smooth, controlled, powerful, no smoke, no warning alarms. The diagnostic screen updated. System stabilizing, performance limited to 70%, service recommended. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Then applause, loud, unrestrained. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He laughed once, stunned, then turned to Caleb. "You saved it," he said. "You actually saved it." Caleb simply wiped his hands on a cloth. "I told you I could," he said. Ethan extended his hand. Caleb paused just for a second, then took it. That handshake meant more than gratitude. It meant recognition, something Caleb hadn't felt in years. "I'd like to talk," Ethan said. "Really talk. About you. About what happened." Caleb considered him, the crowd, the cameras. "I'll listen," he said. "But I won't beg." Ethan nodded. "You won't have to." An hour later, Caleb sat in the back seat of Ethan's SUV. watching the city pass by. Streets he usually walked, now seen from the inside of tinted glass. The guards treated him differently now, more careful, more respectful. At North Star Dynamics, the investor meeting was already buzzing. When Ethan walked in with Caleb at his side, heads turned. Murmurs followed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan said once the room settled, "before we begin, I want you to meet the man who fixed what our engineers said was impossible." Caleb stood quietly as Ethan explained. Briefly, honestly. When invited to speak, Caleb didn't perform. He didn't seek revenge. He simply pointed out flaws, offered solutions, and explained improvements with clarity that stunned the room. By the end, investors were leaning forward, scribbling notes. Funding increased. Projects restructured. Afterward, Ethan closed the conference room door. "I want you here," he said. "Title, salary, resources, whatever you need." Caleb shook his head. "Not like that," he said. Ethan frowned. "Then how?" Caleb took a breath. "I want to build something," he said. "A place for people like me. People who fell through cracks that shouldn't exist." Ethan listened. "A center," Caleb continued, "for overlooked talent. Engineers, scientists, thinkers. People judged by their address, their skin, their past mistakes." Ethan leaned back, stunned. "You're not asking for payback," he said. "You're asking for change." "Yes," Caleb replied, "because I survived, but many don't." Ethan extended his hand again. "Then let's build it," he said, "together." Weeks later, Caleb Monroe stood in a clean apartment, keys in his hand, a desk by the window, books stacked neatly, a future that no longer felt fragile. The world hadn't suddenly become fair, but it had become possible again. And it started the moment someone chose to see him, not as a problem, but as a person. Now let me ask you, honestly, how did this story make you feel? Do you think Caleb's outcome was justice, or just a rare exception? If you believe stories like this matter, comment 1 and 11 below. Tell us, what country are you watching from? And if this story moved you, please share it. Someone else may need to hear it today.